What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Preacher Girl podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Arner, and today on the show, we have a very special guest. His name is Jeff Tatarchuk. He is a super cool individual. He is the founder of Fruition Lab, the co-founder of Vault Minor Incorporation. He is a speaker. He is a purpose coach, a startup consultant. So you guys, I think this is going to be a great episode. And Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. Glad to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself so people kind of know, who you are.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Southern California, and in not a too rich part of town. I was born and raised in San Bernardino, California. Not too many people know of it, but it was the second bankrupt city just behind Detroit. So I never had access to a lot of money growing up, which kind of sent me on this journey to try to find ways to make money. Sent me on my entrepreneurial journey early on. We would do car washes. I would take stuff from my mom's cupboard and mix up the spices and then resell them back to her and the rest of the family. And, I couldn't afford the clothes that my other friends had at school. And so I'd make my own designs and make my own t-shirts and eventually sell them to make money. And so wasn't brought up in a rich home. Wasn't also exposed to a lot of business growing up. My dad is a nurse. He's been a nurse over 40 years. My mom works for a school of nursing. And so obviously they wanted me to be a nurse, but I don't know. There's something about the smell of a hospital. I wanted nothing to do with it. And so I just always wanted to do something with creating things. And I kind of just started early. And school wasn't really my thing growing up. Had a really hard time in school. I was diagnosed with ADHD, like in the 5th grade, dyslexia, and a few other things that really made it hard for me. And I didn't really understand why. Like, why was it so easy for the other kids in the class, and why was it so hard for me? And it really kind of sent me down this spiral that eventually led to depression and then attempted suicide. It was just a rough time trying to fit in with, society and the school systems and all that kind of stuff. And so I had to try to figure out a way to survive and create my own path.
Gotcha. Well, and I know we're going to dive into a little bit of what you just said later on. But I did want to ask you, since you are the founder of Fruition Lab, what is that? Why might people want to get involved in that?
Yeah, Fruition Lab simply was created out of a need, at least within the context that I was brought up in. There wasn't a lot of access to entrepreneurs or investors. There wasn't a lot of talk about it, specifically within my context, within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We typically talk about pastor, teacher, doctor, and healthcare administrators. Like, when you're growing up, that's what you're exposed to. That's what your parents were. That's what your educational path is set before you. But when you talk about starting a business, there wasn't a lot of access to it. And so I remember in high school, I started a skimboard company of sorts. I used to make skimboards in woodworking class and sell them to my friends. And then the question came up, all right, now what are you going to do when you graduate? Like, what college are you going to? I was like, I'm not going. I'm going to continue doing this stuff. And I wish somebody could have come alongside me in high school and said, here are the tools you need to build a company. I just didn't have it. And so always kept creating things. And then I started a business when I was at Andrews, a thrift shop, and I needed help. I went to the business department, and they still didn't have the resources I needed to build this business. And I said, I'm just going to call some friends that I know that are in business, that are doing business. And I started calling friends. I was like, man, there's some people out there doing some really cool things that nobody knows about. And so what would it look like if we pulled a conference together for people to share their stories, for people to share their failures, their resources and things that they use to get to where they're at today. And then we hosted our first Fruition Lab in Phoenix, Arizona, about 3.5 years ago. And it was just a huge success. Like it blew all of my expectations. It was amazing to see entrepreneurs in a room sharing their stories. We had a pitch competition with $1 million on the table, and people came from all over the world. One kid traveled 24 hours from India to pitch his product. And so it just showed me that there was a huge need within my context for entrepreneurship. And then it's just kind of continued to evolve from there. And so what Fruition
Mm,
Lab has become is just a network of entrepreneurs and investors to
mm,
help people be able to make their dreams a reality and to be able to map the path that'll help them get there. And so,
yeah.
yeah, it's
That's
exciting.
awesome. That's really, really cool. Well, and I remember when you came to speak here at Chapel, here at Andrews University, and I think I remember you talking about it a little bit. And me and my friends were like, "That is so cool!" Like we were just like talking about it for a while. Like finally, like someone like wants to help people who want to start their business or whatever it is. So we think it's super cool what you're doing for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So when did you know, you kind of talked about growing up, you were always kind of a business person. When did you know that you wanted to start your own business? Like, was it when you were really young? Like, and did you study business in college or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't know. Like the first things that I did when I was a kid was just out of necessity, out of a need for survival. Like because I wanted to try to keep up with the rest of my friends around me, just to be able to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and then it was weird. I remember being in like elementary school, and I was being raised around Loma Linda. Kids knew they were good
Mm-hmm.
planning on being doctors in elementary school just because their parents were already doctors, and I was like, that's not what I want for my life. But I didn't know yet what I was
Right.
supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I kind of had a I don't know. I didn't, like I said, when I graduated from high school, I didn't want to go to school. I was gonna
Yeah.
either continue making skimboards or learn photography and join the surf circuit and,
Mm.
um, you know, take pictures and live life that way. I just didn't feel like I
Yeah.
fit within the traditional mold, but I didn't know
Uh-huh.
what else to do. And my mom, she happened to get subsidy. She happened to get a
Mm.
discount for college. And she said, Jeff, please just give me one semester. If go to pick any college you want and just give me
Mm.
one semester. And if you hate it, you can quit after one semester. And I ended up
Uh-huh.
going to Southern Adventist University.
Mm.
I took theology just because at the time, like I just had a conversion experience, and I was like, well,
Mm.
if I'm going to school, I really like the Bible. I would love to learn more about the Bible, if anything. And
Mm-hmm.
so went there. Had no idea there was like Greek and Hebrew and all these other
Yeah.
things involved with that.
Right.
But and ended up going there and getting stuck because of the relationships that I built in going to school. Just met some awesome people
Mm-hmm.
that were looking to do some amazing things, and it just really changed the trajectory for me. I had tried to change um, my degree a few times. I went theology, I did education. I think I switched to business for a second, but for some reason I kept getting pulled back into theology
Mm-hmm.
to finish. Like I knew God was calling me to ministry. I just didn't know to what capacity. We had started this nonprofit ministry on campus while we were there,
Uh-huh.
and I was constantly always starting things, but I just didn't know what things. And then this was during the sort of the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Conferences had put a
Uh-huh.
hiring freeze on hiring pastors, and
Mm.
all of the other kids in our department weren't getting picked up, and I had 10 calls to different conferences.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I was, and I'm not trying to brag, but it was,
Yeah.
I turned them all down just because I didn't feel peace about this is the direction God
Wow.
wanted me to go, and everybody's saying, Jeff, you're crazy. Like this is a paid way through seminary, like
Right.
benefits, salary. Like, come on, you're going to be set.
Right.
And for me, that I can't move forward unless I have peace in my life. And so I turned them all down. I
Mm.
ended up doing like Bible work in downtown Chattanooga, working
Oh,
for pennies.
wow.
But that opened up the opportunity for me to do. I got connected with this guy Carlton Bird, worked for his church. That eventually got me connected to doing as an evangelist for Southeastern California Conference in Southern California.
Mm.
And yeah, that was to me
That's
like a
cool.
better fit that I wouldn't have had if I would have said yes to one of those other um, gigs that were offered to me.
Right.
And so it was yeah. So, and then while I was there, so long story long,
Mhm.
while I was there, I, uh, I was, preaching. I love it. I love, sharing the gospel, seeing the light bulb go off, seeing people rebuild gain a relationship with Jesus, experience the hope of Jesus.
Mhm.
But I I I hated the, like, I would baptize people and then I would be afraid to call that church back 2 or 3 months later to see if those people were still there. It was just
Mm.
super frustrating. Um,
Mhm.
and I stumbled upon, I was working in Loma Linda at the time, and one of the churches had opened up a thrift store
Mm.
in connection with their Sabbath school. And I was
Okay.
blown away by it. This was Loma Linda University Church. They had a Sabbath school. Now, I don't know if you've ever been out here to Loma Linda, San Bernardino, but there's Loma Linda on one side, and there's a freeway, the 10 freeway, and then there's San Bernardino on the other side, which is where I'm from.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of like St. Joe, Benton Harbor. Like there's a clear, distinct
Oh,
line
okay.
of distinction between the two between the two
Yeah.
cities.
Like
And
one
I'm
side's really nice and the other side's like really
Yeah,
rough, right?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Like San Bernardino, more gangs per capita, more homeless. Like it's just bad.
Hmm. Wow.
Like
Okay. Yeah.
my neighbors are Hell's Angels. So um, anyway, but I saw the impact that this Sabbath school was having when they opened up a thrift shop, and they opened up a thrift
Mm.
store like butt up against San Bernardino, right at the tail end of Loma Linda. And I saw the impact that it was making, where like 100 people would come through this thrift store a day to
Oh,
buy stuff,
wow.
and I saw that they were able to build relationships with people, and that people were coming to them. When I was an evangelist, I remember having to like drag and beg people
Mm.
and try to
Hmm.
entice them and you
Yeah.
know bait them to come. And for
Right.
this,
Right.
like, people were actually showing up on their own accord. And I
Yeah.
personally love thrift shopping. I was a thrift shopper before
Uh-huh.
Macklemore made it cool.
Yeah. That's
and
great.
so this to me was like a perfect storm of, like, man, so people were able to build relationships, make an impact, and make money. The Sabbath school was bringing in roughly about
Mm.
$15,000 a month.
Wow.
um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, with this thing, and it was all donation. And so I remember at the end of the year, the pastor would get up and say, okay, we have too much money and we need to give it away. Can you
Wow.
apply for the money we have? And no Sabbath school has ever had that problem of having to give away
Right.
money, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so anyway, it was just really, I was like, okay,
Wow.
this is it. Like, it's the perfect storm
Hmm.
of reaching the community, of building a business, and all these different things. And I was like, this is it. And so I went from that
Mm.
to the organization I was working for at the time. I was like, all right, it's time for you to go to seminary. And again, I went kicking and screaming. I was like, no, I'm not a school person. Trust me, like, this is not going to be
Uh-huh.
good. And they eventually, so I went there with the idea of, I'm going to start a thrift store in
Yeah.
this town and just experiment with it. And so that's
Uh-huh.
kind of where the ministry entrepreneurial journey combined for me.
Yeah.
And anyway, just
Wow.
continued to grow from there.
That is really, really cool. So a lot of things stuck out to me from what you were saying. And one of those is that being a school person or not being a school person. Because for me, I've always like struggled with school. Like I'm just not good at it.
Yeah.
And so hearing you say, like you didn't want to go to seminary and like you didn't even want to go to college in the first place, like I feel the same way because it's like I'm just not really good at school. Because
Mm,
some people it's like super easy for them, right? They like get
right.
straight A's, like it's easy.
Uh,
They barely have to study, like it's just super easy. Whereas for others, like myself and some other people I know, it's just you have to work, that much harder. And hearing you say how like you knew you were called to ministry, but it looked different
yeah.
than what everyone, labels it to be. Like you have to be a pastor, like you have to be a doctor, you have to and lately I've been learning myself that I think that God has called me to ministry, but I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like. And so
Mhm.
like hearing you say like you had to figure out what it looked like. You knew it was in ministry, but it looked differently and just trying to figure that out.
Yep.
And so I've just been trying to figure that out too, a lot of praying, a lot of just,
Mm,
in the word, trying to figure out what that looks like. So what would you say to, people like me who are in college, trying to figure out what to do, not very good at school, just trying to, make it, what makes it easier, like, should we pray harder? Like, what does that look like, I guess is my
Well,
question for you.
yeah, great question. I really feel like, especially those that aren't born with the natural ability for education or anything like that, we have to work a lot harder.
Hmm.
And for me, it strengthened my faith a lot more.
Hmm.
it was just really hard. I remember like reading was really hard. Speaking was
Mm-hmm.
really hard. Like I failed preaching class twice. Like I failed
Yeah.
public
Wow.
speaking over and
Yeah.
over again. And
Wow.
and and yet now I'm speaking a lot more
Yeah.
than my friends that got the A's in those classes. You know, I'm paid a lot more
Right.
to speak than my friends that are in those classes. And for me, the
Yeah.
biggest piece is understanding who you are. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
in school, try as many things as possible. Don't get caught in a
Mm.
rut
Mm-hmm.
early on. Like, try as many different things as possible. Don't stay in one lane.
Mm-hmm.
And get involved. Like for me, the reason why I had so many calls is because I was doing so much. We were doing like 3 evangelistic things a year, one on campus, one in the community, and then one for students.
Hmm.
We
Wow.
were doing a ton of stuff. And I remember I remember one conference was like, yeah, we're going to hire you because you got C's and you weren't as focused on the academics, but you were more focused on the
Wow.
practical thing. I was like, oh, that's not what my educational advisor
Yeah.
told me. Um,
Right, right. Yep.
and but
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was actually doing stuff that gives results. That's what people want at the end of the day, no matter what career path
Mm-hmm.
you are in. But
Mm-hmm.
trying as many different things as possible. Like when you're young, you want to figure out what are you good at. Like
Mm-hmm.
what are your strengths? Um,
Mm-hmm.
what and also what are your weaknesses? And to be able to
Mm-hmm.
position those up against each other, to double down on your strengths. Like, sure, you can even out what you're weak in, but I think to be able to double down on your strengths is really, really important. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, like I have people take these tests. I don't know if you've ever taken like the Strengths Finder test or Myers Briggs
Yeah,
or
I
anything
have.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Amazing tests. Like for me, those were big eye openers to me that I wish I would have taken when I was in undergrad,
yeah.
so that I could have
Mm-hmm.
understood myself better. Now, I do think we continue to kind of evolve and grow over time, but I think understanding who we are, what we're good at, and then trying as many different things as possible, whether you're doing landscaping, whether you're,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to code, whether you're, there's so many different things you should be trying to see
Mm-hmm.
um, what you're good at. And then I learned like I'm really good at coming up with ideas, starting things, and then
Mm-hmm.
rallying people around that. And then
Mm-hmm.
my weakness is execution. And so I have to hire and bring on the right people on the team who have
Mm-hmm.
a high level of activation. The
Mm.
doers, the details oriented people, those people have to be at the table. And I had to learn that early on.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think, don't get caught in a rut. I'm a big proponent of, like, there's this text in First Corinthians, Paul, First Corinthians 7:17, I think it is. He says,
Mm-hmm.
only let each person lead the life that is assigned to them.
Mm.
He says,
Mm-hmm.
this is what, do only what God has called you to do. This is my rule in all of the churches. Like, I think it's important for us to listen. What is God calling you to do? Not what your teachers, not what your
Mm.
pastor, not what your parents or your siblings or whatever. Do what
Mm-hmm.
God is telling you to do. And it's important
Mm-hmm.
for us early on to spend time. You said prayer. Yes, pray. Like pray to listen. God,
Mm.
what are you
Mm-hmm.
telling me to do? Um, and listen. Like for me, like when I had those opportunities to go pastor those 10 different, everyone else around me was saying, Jeff, you're crazy. But I knew in my heart and in my head that God was saying, nope, you got to say no to this.
Mm.
And anyway, so that's kind of what helped me along the way. It wasn't an easy journey. I was super discouraged, struggled with depression. Um, it wasn't always clear at the time, but looking back, I can see like, yeah, this is clearly where God wanted me to be.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And you know how you were saying about how you'll kind of have that sense of peace because you said you had like 10 different job offers, but you just didn't feel at peace about it.
Right,
I think that's very relatable because lately I've been praying a lot about some decisions because I'm nearing the end of, my undergrad career and,
right,
there's different job opportunities. And so it's almost been, I'm grateful for different opportunities, but it gets overwhelming pretty quick too. And
mhm,
so just kind of praying and, like you said, just listening and trying to see what you feel most at peace about. So
right.
that's great. Yeah.
And also understanding who you are, like understanding
Mm,
who you are, how you were built to be. Like, well, who did
yeah.
God create? Rachel to be, or the listener.
Right.
Who did God create you to be? What are your unique
Right.
gifts, skills, talents, and experiences that are unique just to you? and
Yeah.
how can you make, the greatest impact in the world versus just being shoved into a box.
Right. For sure. Yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. Well, let's see here. Another question I have for you. Um, so when you do kind of figure out who you are, what you want to do, at some point you're going to face obstacles and setbacks, right? It's like everything could be going great. You know who you are, you know what you're doing, everything's going good, but then something goes wrong. How do you keep going when it gets hard? And sometimes almost it seems impossible to keep pursuing your dream, like you got to pay the bills or whatever it is. What do you do in times like that?
Yeah, great question. I know I've failed a lot. I've tried a lot of things. I've worked towards making a lot of ideas happen, and that have felt like apparent failures. And so those things that I've tried to push forward to make happen that have looked like failures to me are just education tools. Like, I've learned a lot through those things, and to me, it's a fail forward into something else, and I could take into whatever the next venture is. And it's just, for me, number one, learning how to fail forward faster, um,
Mm,
and not be afraid of failure is really important. I think me not being good in school early on, like failing
mm-hmm.
tests, like actually being held
Uh-huh.
back in classes and that kind of stuff,
Uh-huh.
prepared me, even though it sucked when I was in
Uh-huh.
elementary school and junior high, when all of my other friends were doing well in it. I would have to stay over for after school tutoring.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
all of that kind of embarrassment prepped me for the larger failures I would experience, and then how to
Mm,
navigate that kind of stuff. And so, fail early,
mm,
fail often, fail fast. Um, I think another thing, like how to overcome the discouragement, for me,
mm,
okay. So, like, whenever I have an idea, I think somebody, or the person I always look to the most, or the story that kind of helps me get through it the most, is Joseph.
mm,
When I think of Joseph, he was given a dream, and everyone around him, his family, his brothers, they all laughed at him, and to the point where they, like, threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery, and eventually got promoted up to the top, and then falsely accused,
mm-hmm.
sent to prison, forgotten about in prison, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually made it up to, like, the second most powerful person in Egypt. Now,
Yeah.
the crazy thing to me is, like, man, like, that's horrible. Like, God gave
Right.
Joseph a dream, and then he has to go through all of these obstacles from
Mm,
him, number one, receiving the dream. And scholars believe he received the dream when he was about 17 years old, to
mm-hmm.
when the dream became a reality. He was about 30. So it was about 13 years he was experiencing obstacles from the time he received it to the time it became a reality.
Mm. Wow.
And you would think Joseph would be like, God, like, what's going on? Like, you gave me this dream. Why isn't it becoming a
Right.
reality? I think the first thing we need to understand is um, that it wasn't actually Joseph's dream. It
Mm,
was God's dream given to Joseph. And
mm,
so,
mm-hmm.
whenever you have an idea or something that is on your heart that you're like, man, I want to make this thing a reality, you need to know and understand, and first check, is this something God wants me to do? If it is, and if it's a God dream, then you understand it's not your dream, but it's God's dream. And therefore, it's not
Mm,
your reality to make that thing a reality, or not your
mm,
responsibility, but it's God's responsibility to make it a reality. No matter what obstacles come your way, you're
mm-hmm.
able to navigate those things. And so, yeah, that's really helped me, because there's been times, even with, so for instance, like, every single venture I've ever been a part of, there's always been huge obstacles or things in my way that seem
Yeah.
like there's going to be no way out. I'll give you, like, the
Mm-hmm.
most recent one with Fruition. Fruition is a nonprofit, 501c3, and we're doing this for entrepreneurs and investors, like the
Mm,
capitalism building of America. Like, we're not feeding starving children in South America, and so
mm,
fundraising for it has been very tricky. Like, we'll put on these events, people will be blown away by the success and how much
mm,
value they took from it. They're like, "Hey, Jeff, you're doing great. Keep up the good work. This is awesome." And I'll
mm-hmm.
say, awesome. Well, I'll give you my routing number and mailing address, and you could send us a check to help us to be able to keep this thing on the road.
Right,
And they're
right.
like, and we'd get a whole slew of reasons why they can't help support.
Mm,
But and I go home, like, frustrated, like, God, what's going on?
mm-hmm.
Why does this happen? I'll never forget it. Here's a really good example. So this was last year. I was offered a position to pastor,
Mm.
And I was doing fruition. I had a gym in Berrien Springs, Michigan. I just sold the gym, moved back to Southern California. I was kind of living off of that money
Mhm.
while building the next thing, doing
Mm.
fruition. And I was like, man, but benefits would be really cool right now. And
Mm.
somebody offered me to pastor at this church, Crosswalk in Loma Linda.
Mm. Mhm.
And then that was Wednesday. Okay. Friday,
Mm.
I had a conversation with one of my donors in fruition. I was like, "Hey, like we need to get to this place financially, and if we can't, like we're not going to be able to continue doing it." And by the end of that
Mhm.
conversation, like he didn't offer to give any money, and I was like, "Oh!" I remember being so discouraged. Like, God, like
Mm.
this has been like literally. I have people telling me, millionaires coming to me saying, "Jeff, because of you, I've made even more money."
Wow.
Like this
Wow.
has impacted my family, like billionaires, literally tears coming
Wow.
down their face, like because of the impact of this thing. But nobody's
Wow.
writing checks, and I'm just like, what in the
Mm.
world? Like this is
Mhm.
driving me up the wall. And I had
Yeah.
this conversation with this guy. He's like, Jeff, because of you, like I've never broken the million a year mark for his company. And he says, because
Mm.
of you, because of fruition, we finally broke the million a year mark. And
Wow.
he still wasn't willing to cut a check to support fruition. I'm like, is it me?
Mm.
Is it the business? Like, what is it? And I remember being super frustrated leaving that conversation.
Mhm.
Like, fine, God, I'm going to scrap fruition and I'm going all in with pastoring. Clearly, that's what you
Mm.
want me to do.
Mhm.
And and I had to tell the pastor that offered me the job that next Wednesday. And I got a call from a guy Monday. So I had that really frustrating conversation Friday, and then Monday, this guy calls me out of the blue. He's saying, "Hey, I'm so and so. I heard about fruition. We haven't met yet. I haven't been to a fruition event, but I want to see what I can. I've heard great things, and I want to see what I can do to support. What do you
Mm.
need?" I was like,
Wow.
"Oh shoot, that is crazy."
Yeah.
And so to me, and yeah, like literally got our whole budget, salaries covered for like years. So
Wow.
that was like literally,
Wow.
and I couldn't have planned that. And so to me, it
Yeah.
was like just having literally like it's the faith journey of having to move one foot, one step at a time with
Mm.
God. And sure, like we can get discouraged, we can get frustrated, but I
Mhm.
truly believe like fruition is a God thing that God has put on my heart. It's God's dream, and
Mhm.
he kind of has me as the steward of the dream to manage it. But
Mm.
yeah, so whatever obstacles
Wow.
or things come in my way, it's like, no, God, okay, that's what gives me peace through the
Uh-huh.
discouragement. Is like, okay,
Mm.
God, at the end of the day, this is yours, and whatever you want to see happen will happen if you want it to happen.
Yeah.
And it has. It's happened time and time again, like at the times we least expected it. Um, and at just the perfect timing. Like I can't time it. And that's also the thing with
Yeah.
Joseph. Like it wasn't according to Joseph's timing. It was
Mhm.
according to God's timing.
Yeah.
And so this is what's amazing to me. So it took 13 years for that time, from the time of 17 to 30 years old but Joseph
Uh-huh.
was living the dream from 30 to like 120. So for 90 years, he was able to live
Mm.
the dream because he was
Yeah.
willing to go through the obstacles those 13 years. Now, those
Mhm.
13 years pale in comparison
Mhm.
when you look at the fact that he lived the dream that God put on his heart for 90 years after that. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I get through it. And I
Yeah.
deal with a lot of discouragement and the realities of business and trying to overcome
Mhm.
obstacles. And you have to have the right
Mhm.
people around you who genuinely love you and have the best interest for you. Especially it's hard in business because people have their own self-interest in mind,
Mm.
but to
Mhm.
find people who are genuinely seek your best interest and care about you that you
Right.
can get feedback from has been really crucial for me through these times.
Mhm.
Can't trust everyone out here on these streets.
Right. Yeah. Man, there's so many things. Everything you just said was really, really great. I just think it's so true about the whole timing thing. I mean, the
Mm,
fact that like within a matter of days, like you thought you were gonna go pastor, you thought you had to like drop the whole fruition thing, and then that all changed in such a short amount of time. And just lately, I've really been learning to, because I everyone likes to feel like they have a sense of control,
mhm,
and wanting to know what's next, figure out how to pay this bill, how to pay for school, how to all those different things. And I'm reading this book called Preach to Yourself right now. And she's been talking about how sometimes you really just got to give it to God, and like your plans and everything, like you just have to give it to God, because even when we say like, yeah, like, I'm giving this to God, like I'm surrendering to God, there's still like that part of you that like is like, well, okay, can I pick up this extra job? Maybe I can do this, how can I, and still trying to figure that out. And there is definitely a part of that you need to do. But at the same time, just like fully like giving your situation to God and trusting
Mhm,
him and his timing.
mhm.
And it's easier said than done for sure.
So it's so easy. Now I always tell, now this is me, like it's so easy. Like if you take theology and you get a job as a pastor, like it's actually super easy. Like you get a job
Mm-hmm.
as a pastor and you literally you preach once a week. You might, lead a prayer meeting on
Mm-hmm.
Wednesdays, and you facilitate like board meeting once a month, and you might have some visitation and stuff like that. Like that's not a ton
Mm-hmm.
of work. And so
Yeah.
in order for you to do those things plus get like the salary and benefits, like that's awesome. So it
Yeah.
takes a lot more faith to actually listen and do what God tells you to do than it does to just step out and do what somebody gives you on a
Mm-hmm.
silver platter. That's not to
Mm-hmm.
say that that's wrong, but
Yeah. Right. Right.
it's important. It's important to know that this is what God has called you to do, versus
For
just
sure.
doing it because it's what's in front of you and you have school debt that you have to pay off.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome. So another question I have for you, along the lines of faith, has there ever been a time like in your life where you just didn't want anything to do with God and you felt like, I don't know if this is for me. I don't need, like, I have business, like it's going good, like I don't need God. Has that ever happened to you?
Um, Not recently. So, but I was okay. So I was raised in a Christian home. I went through private Christian schools, but there was a chunk from like sixth to ninth grade where I was an atheist.
Mm, mm-hmm.
That I to me, like Christianity and the denomination I was a part of didn't make any sense, and there seemed to be a lot of contradictions. And I started looking in other denominations, and I started looking in other religions, and eventually kind of went down this slippery slope of like, okay, well, maybe how do we know the Egyptians weren't right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was really on this path to try to figure out what truth was, and then I started getting into like the occult and spiritualism and all this kind of stuff, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, 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 whoa! If I go down this path, it doesn't look like I'm coming back, so I'm just gonna put up a wall, say I'm an atheist, and call it a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there was a big time. There was a time there where like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't cool. Like this was like eighth grade, where all my friends were getting baptized, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like this punk rock atheist kid
Yeah.
in private school. That yeah, so there was a big chunk for me, and honestly, it was a part of that not feeling like I fit in, and
Mm-hmm.
struggling with these things that I had been labeled ADHD, dyslexic, and then because I was doing bad in school, I got depressed, and I'm so
Mm-hmm.
okay, well here's some pills for depression, and
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, eventually like in eighth grade, attempted suicide, and I was like, okay, there has to be a way out of this darkness, and so
Mm-hmm.
to me that was the only option, and I didn't feel hope, I didn't see a way out, and um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was a really hard, dark place. And so experiencing that darkness and that amount of pain, and
Mm-hmm.
then coming to experience the gospel, when I read a
Mm-hmm.
book by Max Lucado called "He Chose Nails," and I learned about the sacrifice of Jesus, and that the guilt that I was harboring, like he took all of that from me, and I just remember my heart just being bursted open and broken and worn, just hugged, and so
Mm-hmm.
many things that I'd never experienced before.
Yeah.
And so to put those two up against each other, the pain of being like depressed and suicidal, and experiencing the hope of Jesus, I've never gone back to questioning God, or to questioning if He exists. I've questioned God a
Mm-hmm.
lot, like in wrestling with
Mm-hmm.
Him, and trying to figure out life and things moving forward. But no,
Mm-hmm.
he has been a constant presence. But I've definitely, we've gone head to head at a few things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so for me, like faith has been a strong piece. Like I can't go back. Like there's been too many miracles that have happened in my life
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
I can't deny His existence. Are there things
Mm-hmm.
that I don't fully understand? Yes. So there are times I question, like religion and
Mm-hmm.
processes how we currently do things all the time. But God,
Mm-hmm.
no, no, no way.
Yeah. Yeah. So leading into like faith and business, was there a time where you're like, okay, like there's no way I'm going to start a business without like praying about it first? Or like, what does that look like for you, like integrating faith and business?
Yeah. So for me, um, being an entrepreneur and, discovering that, like, I had an epiphany that God created us in the beginning to create.
Mm,
Like God made every single person on the planet. Like, he created the world in 6 days, plants, trees, fish, all this stuff. And
mm,
he spoke those things to existence, came down and then fashioned mankind into his image. And I love it that he was able to take like these immaterial thoughts in his brain and create these things that we currently see in the natural world around us, and yet
mm,
gave us the exact same ability to be able to take immaterial thoughts in our brains and make them a
mm,
material reality, whether it's the phone we're listening to this from, the computer, the desk, the car, the buildings, the businesses. Like, he gave us the ability to take immaterial thoughts and make those things a material reality. And so to
mm,
me, it's a divine process that
mm.
needs to be cultivated and encouraged. Like, a lot of times, especially within Christian circles, like, Christianity is, or creativity is demonized to a great extent.
Mhm,
But in reality,
mhm.
like, it is a divine characteristic. It is what it means
Yeah,
to be made in the image of God, to be able to then go out and create. And so to me,
yeah.
like, God is a part of the process, whether Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos know it, like, God is a part of the process. God has given them the gifting to
Mm,
do what they've been able to do, whether they accept it or not. Like, they wouldn't be able to do it without
mhm,
it. So yeah, it's been
mhm,
really important for me. I definitely, yeah, pray through it. They say entrepreneurs are like the least like consistent spiritually on the planet, and I probably agree with that. Like yeah, like devotions aren't like a super consistent thing.
Yeah.
I did hire a business coach about a year ago, and it's totally rocked
Mhm.
my world in many different areas of my life. I call this guy like my human Adderall. Like, he is what like keeps me focused and on track, and it's like given me the structure I need to
Yeah.
be able to create the morning routines that are essential for success, and all the other
Mm.
pieces necessary to like run a successful business.
Yeah.
But yeah, faith has definitely always been there. Like, I go by my that peace that in my gut is a big thing, and it's not for everyone. Um,
Mhm.
but it's definitely how I've been able to make big decisions in the past. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a big piece. But I definitely think like having knowing how God speaks to you is really important,
Mm.
and listening and trusting that is really key.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a lot of people think, well, not a lot, but some people think, it's going to be some audible voice, you're hearing
Nope,
God speak to you.
nope.
I know for me, that's like never the case, like at all.
Exactly. Right, exactly.
Yeah. And it's almost like what you're saying. A lot of times it's like, having ideas or thoughts, and just like, or maybe driving down the road and you see a billboard that, it's just like, it's
Yep.
always something. Or even when you're watching like a TV show, I know that's happened to me before too.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
so yeah, God has lots of different ways of speaking to us, which I think is really cool.
Mm,
And I think if we can kind of remember that, that can almost be kind of a relief for us. It doesn't have to be something we have to really work so hard at trying to hear God. We
Yep.
just kind of have to be still in His
Yep.
presence.
Totally.
Yeah, no, that's great. So on your Instagram, one of your posts, and you kind of talked on it here, you struggled with ADHD, being dyslexic, being afraid of public speaking. Yet here you are, like you said, speaking so many places, traveling. It's just what you do. Um, why do you feel so inspired? I wanted to ask you that to
Mhm.
share the gospel and Jesus with others. And also, how did you overcome all those different things,
Mm. Um, so for me, it was the positioning up against the pain I experienced going through the darkness, depression, the suicidal thoughts, all of that. Like, I remember
Mm-hmm.
it so vividly, and the being uh, positioned up against the peace that I experienced when I experienced the gospel for the first time. And
Mm,
to me, I was compelled because I know that there are other people out there in the world who are experiencing that same amount of pain who don't know about
mm,
the hope that I currently have. And
mm,
so compelled, like seriously, I told God, I said, listen, God, anytime somebody asks me to speak, if I am available and it's in my schedule to do it, I will do it. No
mm.
questions asked. Like deathly afraid. One of the guys who spoke at the last fruition event, Devon Franklin, he says, you need to make your fears your to-do list.
Mm.
And to me, that was it. Like deathly afraid, like, oh my goodness, like wouldn't show up to class, would rather take an F in speech
Yeah.
class than to get it. Like literally, I couldn't even recite the national anthem, like up in front of
Mm,
people, like just so afraid. However, I remember the first time I preached ever in life. I think I was a junior in high school, Monterey Bay
mm.
Academy. I broke my foot the week before, lost my voice.
Oh, wow.
Also just freaking out about a ton of stuff. And everything was written down word for word. And I remember getting up there and I had this like nervous tick dance that I was doing, like, and I was just reading it and I was like, this is the worst. Like, this is the weakest I've ever been in my entire life. And I was like, this is going to be
Mm.
horrible. Like throwing up the morning of, like, it was just
Wow.
terrible. Getting
Wow.
up there, doing it, it was like a 12-minute talk, getting down and then seeing tears coming down people's faces. And I was like, oh
Mm.
my goodness.
Wow.
Like God used me in my weakest
Mm.
point to reach people that that
Mm.
and I knew at that point that it was no longer me doing it. I knew that it
Yeah.
was God taking whatever mess was coming out of my mouth. He was repackaging it just the way the people in the audience need to hear it. And then
Mm.
I was like, okay,
Mm.
fine, God. Like if you can do something with that mess that I just did up there and impact
Mm.
people's lives, I'll do it.
Mm.
Like, and to me,
Wow.
it took a lot of humbling. I've bombed a lot of presentations. I've literally, yeah, like come down like that didn't even make any sense to me. Like I'm sure people in
Yeah.
the audience like, we need that half hour back of our time. Like I've messed up a lot, and so for me, it's always been like, okay, God. But however, like the times I've messed up the most are when I've seen God work the most, and I
Mm.
just have to trust
Mhm.
it. The whole text of, my grace is sufficient for you, for my grace is made perfect in weakness.
Mm.
Most gladly, therefore, I'd rather glory in my infirmity, so the power of Christ may rest upon me. And
Mm.
that's what it is. Like I have to be willing to humble myself, understand what my weaknesses are, and know, like in those weaknesses, know that like in my stuttering inefficiencies, my dyslexic can't read this publicly,
Mm.
um, knowing that I'm not like the rest of the people in the room, knowing that that's actually where my power comes from. I remember I
Mm.
was sitting in a group of people once. There's like a bunch of celebrities, actors, and football players in a room, and this guy was facilitating a conversation. And I remember everybody was going around the room talking about what they do, and there was this one guy. He was like, "Yeah, I'm a hedge fund manager. I went to Stanford, UC Berkeley, blah blah blah, managing billions of dollars."
Mm.
And the facilitator said, "Stop. Okay, now tell us what you're going through right now." And so he
Mm.
started opening up about his struggles, his pains, and that kind of stuff. And he says, notice what happened in the room. When you were talking about all of your accolades and your pedigree and all the stuff that you've done, people were actually leaned back, tuned out to what you were saying. Even though
Mm.
you thought that would draw people in, people didn't really care about that.
Right.
However, when you started talking about your weaknesses, your sufferings, and your pain, that's when the audience
Yeah.
leaned in. And
Wow.
so for me, what it showed was that there's a power in our weakness. There's a power in being vulnerable that
Mm.
that isn't there when we posture ourselves to be better than we really are. And so for me, I've owned that. It's like, okay, well, that's one thing I can be really good at is sucking at a lot of things. So if that's the case, I'm going to be really good at that. Like, so cool. I'm going to have a ton of grace on me then. And so honestly, like that's how I've been able to position myself. And so even with like, me sharing, like it's embarrassing, like being ADHD and dyslexic. And what I've learned is like, okay, for instance, like dyslexia, I'm just kind of learning how this works because there wasn't a lot of stuff for people, at least when I was growing up and in school. Um,
Mm.
I've learned that people with dyslexia, like most people think linearly, like just one, stream of thought, but dyslexic people
Mhm.
see things in patterns. And I was like, I
Mm,
totally get it. Like when I study the Bible, like I see things all over the Bible that most people don't see. And I was like, it's
mm,
because I'm weird. Is this because I don't know what's going on? But no, it's just the way my brain is built. And so I see it
mm,
more so then as a superpower than I do as a
mm.
weakness.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really helped me get through it. So number one, like being willing to confront the fear and realize that
Mm,
what I really want in life and what God really wants for me is on the other side of my fears.
mm,
You know what I'm
mhm.
saying? Like you have to
Yeah.
be willing to go into the cave to get what you really want.
Mm, mhm,
Because what you really want is in that cave and you just don't know it yet. But it's your fear, and your fear. And the crazy thing, it's your fear that's the only thing keeping you from that thing. And the fear
mm,
is this thing we have kind of conjured up in our brains that doesn't necessarily always match reality. And so,
mhm,
so yeah, that's been a big thing for me. It's just number one, like being super compelled. Like I know what it's like to suffer in pain and depression, and I want people to
mhm,
experience the hope that I currently have. And I'm willing to do whatever. I'm willing to suffer the pain of like public speaking pain.
mm, mhm.
The pain of public speaking is nothing in comparison to the pain of like suicidal depression. And
Right.
I'm willing to go through that because I want to help other people out of that. And
Yeah.
so, um, yeah, so that's kind of been my thing, and just through the process, like over the last, I don't know how long has it been, like 17 years I've been doing this. It's I
Mm.
can't say it's gotten easier. Like I still get nauseous, I still get sweaty palms, like I
Wow,
still don't
yeah.
feel like I always know what I'm going to say, but
Mhm,
but I still know that like God can take this, and as long as I stay like connected, and I know I know like
mhm,
if I'm weak, and I know if I'm talking about me and I'm bragging about me,
mhm,
like it's not always gonna be the best. But I know that when
mhm,
God is connected to it, I know if especially like
mhm,
if I always have my Bible in my hand, I feel a certain sense of peace. But I
mm,
also have this saying like nobody has a right to hear the gospel twice when there are those in the world who've never heard it once. And,
mm.
and it's like I just want to do whatever it takes to get the gospel out to the world. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question,
Yeah.
but
Oh, for sure, yeah. No,
yeah,
that's super, super great. And I know for me, because I've been in some dark places too, like suicidal thoughts, depression, all those
yeah,
different things. And going from that, to a place because now I'm like, okay, like I have this hope, like what you're talking
hmm
about. Like I have
hmm
this hope that is kind of like the thing that keeps me going, right? And it's like to keep that to myself, like it just that doesn't feel right, like at all. And so to hear you say, like, even though like you still get nervous, like you still get nauseous, like public speaking, like talking about God, like you still want to do that because you know what it's done for you. I think that's awesome. And for me, like right now, I'm actually taking this communication class where we have to speak up front, for like maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes. Like we're supposed to read this manuscript from a book, and it's so crazy because I'll get up there and I'll be like starting to read. My voice gets so shaky. Like I don't know what's happening. Like I feel like I can't breathe. Like, and it's only like 1 or 2 minutes.
mm
Yet, like I just spoke at this youth retreat where I had to I had 4 sermons to all these young
mm
people. Like my voice wasn't shaking, like I was totally good, like
mm
everything, like it's just crazy because, and then that's like a reminder to me, like that it's not me, like it's all God. Like if i
mm
if i can't, talk for a minute or two up front in front of like 20 people in class, but yeah, I can stand in front of like 60 young people like sharing the gospel. It's like I know that that's all God. And so hearing you say that, like you still like, it's not super easy, like getting up front
mm
still, but
mm
knowing that God's still going to speak through you, like
mm
that's powerful. That's really
mm.
powerful.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's
yeah.
big. And
Yeah. So
also,
thank
like
you.
I remember thinking, like even in like preaching class, I used to think like, what if there's a student in this class who isn't really saved, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to take it just as serious. You know what I'm saying? Like to me,
Yeah.
that's how I had to think of things. And even
Yeah.
like one of my kryptonite, like speaking to elementary school students, is my kryptonite. Like, oh my goodness, it just terrifies me more than anything else. I can speak to like the most successful, like celebrities, entertainers, billionaires all day, but put me in front of a bunch of elementary school students that could see right through. your BS, like it just,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, it is the most fearful thing to me on the planet. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
That's
it's a
funny.
thing though. It's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and at that youth retreat, I felt like you're saying they could see right through me. So it kind of kind of broke down the walls and just, makes you be more transparent. And
Yes.
yeah, it's an amazing experience for sure
Mhm.
when you're willing to work for God and do what he wants
Mhm.
you to do. Yeah. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom of yours with us here today. Is there, any social media platforms that you want people to follow you on or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, check me out on Instagram, just Jeff Tatarchuk, Tatarchuk, and then also Fruition Lab. If you are an entrepreneur or you're interested in entrepreneurship in any capacity, or you have an idea that you want to make a reality, whether it's a nonprofit, for-profit, product, whatever, if you want to want to join and become a part of a community of entrepreneurs, dreamers, doers, builders, go to fruitionlab.org, sign up for our email list to stay up to date on events that are coming up and cool resources that we have coming down the pipeline. Or if you just have any questions at all about, where you feel like you're at in the journey, I definitely want to help with that. So yeah, just go to fruitionlab.org, subscribe to our email list, or you can email me directly, jeff@fruitionlab.org, if you have any questions at all about business, because I wish somebody would have helped me along the way. And that's where I feel like I'm supposed to be today, to help other people through that process. So if
Mm,
that's you, hit me up. I'm happy to help in any capacity to do that. And yeah, that's about it.
awesome. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and go ahead and rate and review if you would like. I would really appreciate that as well. Just remember that you're awesome and God is always looking out for you. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your day.